What if the most dangerous thing about meeting someone wasn't falling in love with them, but having to spend the rest of your life knowing exactly what you walked away from? That question will sit with you. It sat with me. And it comes from one of the quietest, most unsettling manga I've read in years. We're talking about Memories of Emanon, a story by Shinji Kajio, art by Kenji Tsuruta, published in Monthly Comic Ryu, collected in a single wideband volume. And no, the short page count is not a problem. We'll get to that. I picked this up because someone in the comments mentioned it in the same breath as Mushishi. I was suspicious. I'm often suspicious. I was also, in this case, completely wrong. Before we go further, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and I genuinely appreciate it. I'll wait. Welcome aboard! Let's get into it. The setup is deceptively simple. It's 1967. Japan is still processing the post-war. A young man, we never learn his name, boards an overnight ferry to Kyushu. He's a sci-fi enthusiast, a would-be writer, adrift in the way that 20-year-olds are adrift when they haven't figured out who they are yet. He meets a girl on the deck. She's about 17. She smokes like she's been doing it for decades. She's got that quality some people have where you can't quite tell if they're deeply content or deeply sad. Maybe both, because those things aren't opposites. Her name, she tells him, is Emanon. It's not her real name, she says, but it's the name she uses. If you haven't clocked it yet, Emanon backwards is no name. This is not a subtle manga. It's also not a manga that needs to be. Here's the premise. Emanon carries within her the memories of every single living thing that has existed on Earth since the first strand of life appeared in the primordial soup, roughly 3 billion years ago. When she was born, she inherited her mother's memory. When her mother was born, she inherited her mother's memory, going all the way back. Every death, every evolution, every moment of consciousness this planet has ever produced, she holds it all. And she's 17 years old. The narrative unfolds entirely on that ferry crossing. The nameless protagonist listens. He asks questions. He tries to apply sci-fi logic to what she's telling him, offers hypotheses, frameworks, genre explanations. She entertains them with the patience of someone who has genuinely heard it all before, which, given her memory, she has. Several billion years worth of it. What the manga is actually doing underneath that conversation is something more specific. It's asking, what does it cost to carry everything? And what does it cost to be the person who doesn't? The person who just carries one ordinary life and then forgets. The back half of the volume jumps forward 13 years. The narrator is now a salaryman in his mid-30s. He gave up on writing. He built a life. He has a vague sense that he traded something essential for something comfortable, and he can't quite name what it was, until a moment at the end of the book that I'm not going to describe in detail here, but if you've read it, you know exactly the panel I'm talking about. I will flag this. There is some nudity in this volume. It's handled with the kind of matter-of-fact quality that fits the tone. Not gratuitous, but it's there. Worth knowing before you read it on the train. Kenji Tsuruta's line work is the kind that rewards slowing down. He works in a tradition of Japanese illustration that owes something to mid-century European comics. Fine cross-hatching, a love of negative space, figures rendered with enough anatomical care that they feel grounded in actual bodies rather than manga archetypes. Emanon herself is drawn with deliberate ambiguity. She reads as young until she doesn't. There's a quality in her eyes, a flatness maybe, or a depth. It's hard to separate the two. That makes you understand why the narrator can't quite reconcile what he's seeing with what she's telling him. Tsuruta earns that effect through restraint. He doesn't overplay it. The fairy setting is rendered in beautiful, slightly hazy detail. Night scenes, deck railing, cigarette smoke, the particular quality of being on open water between destinations. There's an atmosphere here that's more evocative than any single dramatic panel. This is a manga where mood is the point, and the art serves that with real craft. The pacing of the panels is unusual. There are sequences with almost no text, just faces, hands, the line of the horizon. For a story that lives and dies on its ideas, Tsuruta trusts the visual silence in a way that lesser artists wouldn't. Those wordless stretches land harder than almost anything the script actually says. If I had one criticism, the flash-forward section in the second half feels slightly less considered visually. The shift in time is necessary for the story, but the daytime city sequences don't have quite the same texture as the night fairy material. It's a minor thing. The opening sequence is so strong that it sets an almost unfair standard. There are really only two characters here, and the manga knows it. The narrator is a surrogate for the reader, specifically for the reader who has read enough science fiction to immediately start generating hypotheses when something strange happens, and who uses intellectual engagement as a way of keeping emotional engagement at arm's length. He's not a coward. He's just a 20-year-old who doesn't know yet that ideas and feelings aren't actually separate categories. Emanon is one of the most carefully constructed characters I've encountered in this format. The trick is that she could easily tip into either of two failure modes: the manic pixie dream girl who exists purely to change a man's life, or the tragic immortal figure crushed under the weight of all that memory. Kajio avoids both. Emanon is tired in a way that isn't melodramatic. She's curious in a way that isn't performed. She finds the narrator's sci-fi frameworks charming rather than exhausting, which says something important about her. She has enough distance from any single conversation to find it worth having. Thematically, this manga is about the relationship between memory and identity. What are you without the capacity to remember? And what are you if you can never forget? The narrator represents one pole, ordinary human forgetting. The kind that lets you sleep at night. The kind that makes each new day feel like it could go somewhere. Emanon represents the other. Total continuity. Every cause and every consequence. 3 billion years of context for every single moment. Neither pole is presented as better. That's what makes this a serious piece of work rather than a philosophical thought experiment in manga form. The book earns its melancholy. 3 things this manga does that almost no other manga does. First, there's the restrained. Kajio has a premise that could fill 12 volumes with backstory, flashbacks, immortality, angst, relationship drama. He uses none of it. The entire story is a single conversation on a ferry, and it is exactly as long as it needs to be. That kind of editorial self-control is rare, and it makes the manga feel complete in a way that sprawling series often don't. Second, Emanon's memory is never used as a plot device. She doesn't have special knowledge that saves someone. She doesn't see the future. She doesn't intervene in history. Her 3 billion years of memory is a fact about her interiority, not a narrative mechanism. That choice is philosophically honest and narratively brave. And third, the ending. I won't describe it in detail, but it does something structurally that recontextualizes the entire first section. It doesn't change what happened. It just changes what it meant. And it does this in about 4 panels, without a single word of explanation. If you've read Inio Asano, the kind of emotional gut punch he lands in Solanin, this has that same quality. The manga trusts you to feel it without telling you how. 2 honest issues. The first is structural. The flash forward in the second half, the 13 years later section, is necessary, but the transition is abrupt. There's no real preparation for the tonal shift. If you go in expecting the entire manga to have the atmospheric, almost hypnotic quality of the ferry sequence, The second half will feel like a gear change that wasn't fully engineered. It still works, but it's the weakest seam in the book. And the second is a readership issue rather than a quality issue. This is a manga where almost nothing happens, in the plot event sense of the word. Two people talk on a ferry. If you need forward momentum to stay engaged, if you read manga for incident, this will feel like it's refusing to give you what you want. That's a legitimate response. The manga is asking you to be still for an hour. And not everyone is in that headspace when they pick up a book. I say this not as a criticism of the reader, but as a genuine flag. Read this when you have the right kind of quiet around you. Who should read this? Read this if you like manga that sits with you for days after you've finished it. Read this if you ever thought about what it would mean to actually remember everything. Read this if you find Mushishi's episodic quietude satisfying rather than frustrating. Skip this manga if you're looking for a protagonist who does things. Skip this if philosophical dialogue dressed as fiction makes you impatient. And skip this if you need to care about what happens next rather than what the present moment means. My personal verdict, an 8 out of 10. And honestly, the 2 points I'm not giving it are less about quality and more about the fact that the flash-forward section introduces a slight structural unevenness that keeps the whole thing from being seamless. What it is, at its core, is a meditation on what makes a human life meaningful when all memory eventually ends, and what it might cost to have a life where none of it ever does. Kajio wrote this in 1983 as a prose story. Tsuruta adapted it with enough care that the manga version feels like it was always supposed to be in this format. I finished this on a Friday evening and then sat with it for a while. I didn't want to immediately open the next thing. That's rare. That's the standard I hold things to. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. The question Emanon leaves you with, whether ordinary forgetting is a mercy or a loss, is one I keep coming back to, and I'd be curious to know where you land on it. So drop it in the comments, I read them all. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, it helps the channel more than you think, and if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.